Of the Talmud, because the Talmud does go on, the Jewish literature, very early Jewish literature, does go on and on about the temple and about the city and so on, more the temple, or Josephus, or archaeology, or a little bit New Testament. And uh, well, you can't see it very well. Let's do it. Wait a minute. Here, I got get my eyes sorry. Look, if you will, way to the north of the model, there is a wall. You see that wall? Way to the north. Now, if you let your eye follow it to the left, there's a big high tower on the corner. See the great big high tower? Now come our way, and it comes all the way down here and cuts in to where there are 3 high towers. See that? Take that wall away. That wall was not there in Jesus' day. Now, I'm going to say that again as we go around, but this is 66 AD. We're looking at 33 AD. And in 33 AD, when Jesus was here and crucified here, that northern wall, and it goes all the way around and connects with the Temple Mount on this side. So let's get the main features. Let's make sure everybody's on board with the main features. We'll start on the east, and this valley right here is the Kidron Valley. This valley on the right is the Kidron Valley, and that's the valley we were sitting above, because yonder the Kidron Valley is the Mount of Olives. So now you have, again, Jerusalem is 2 hills and 3 valleys. You can see the hills from here. On the one hand, you have the eastern hill, which is the Temple Mount, and here at last you get a bit of a glimpse of the city of David. It's that little tongue of land that comes down from the Temple Mount. You see that? Honest to goodness, that's Jebus. That's what David captured. He didn't have to wall it. It was already walled in. But that's all he had. Now, he's going to buy a threshing floor just north, and it was precisely under where the temple itself sits. Now, let's sort that out. What that model is of Herod's massive Temple Mount. Now, the temple itself is the 90-foot white marble and ivory building that you see in the middle. See? That's where Solomon's temple sat. It's where Herod's temple sat. And it's where Abraham offered up Isaac. And it's where David an angel stopped a plague, and David bought the threshing floor. So again, I'm going to say that it's a hill that just gently comes down to the city of David. But Herod built that mammoth. Now, while I've got you looking at it, I want to make sure, because this is it's not an easy idea, I don't think, to get your arms around entirely. But again, and I told you before, I think, that you know that this is our buddy Herod the Great. This is the guy who tries to kill the baby Jesus. This is the guy who dies just as Jesus is being born. But he's king here from 40 BC, and he marvelously rebuilds the city, and in so doing, he rebuilds their temple. Now watch. On page 85. Is that right? No. I think it's 87. Yeah, page 87. I include this picture. Now, this really is helpful, but it takes you a minute to think about it. This is a drawing of the system. Oh, thank you, bro. The system of retaining wall. The idea is simply that you can't put a temple on the knob of a hill, so you have to build some sort of structure and then put a floor on it. And Herod built a mammoth one. Solomon built one. And then Hezekiah built one in yellow, but then the Hasmoneans developed. But then this is Herod's retaining wall system. Does that make sense to you? It's not the temple. It's the sandbox that he built and put a lid on so he could put the temple on top of it. Got that? Now, with that in mind, look at the temple, the model that you have in front of you. And this is the way the model makers have helped us. Notice that there are about half. Look at the southern wall. All right, we're on the southern end, and the southern wall has those 2 double gates. And notice that about halfway up the wall, you have what are called what are they called? Pilasters. Pilasters, and they are engaged pillars. They're fake pillars. You see what I'm saying? So halfway up the wall, you've got these fake pillars, and that is where the actual temple starts. Everything below it is this, not this, is this. That makes sense to you? So again, that's what is still standing there. What's standing is this this system of walls that he built around so that he could put the temple on top of it. That's what we were looking at. When I said last night, count up 7 courses. That was part of the retaining wall system. And I said it's not part of the temple, because Jesus said folks, there's a guy right now trying to make the case that in point of fact, that's not where the temple was. The temple was down here in the city of David. It's, in my mind, marginally insane. Now, you go on YouTube and there's somebody, you can talk into anything. You know what I'm saying? So but his whole argument is, wait a minute, the Bible says that not one stone will be left upon another, and how come you got stones there then? It's the retaining wall system. That makes sense? All right, so that's Herod's massive temple. We'll talk about it when we come back. Now notice, and know this just ought to be part of your mental furniture. Israel's had 2 temples. The first one was built by Solomon and destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. The second one was built by an Old Testament hero who you never talk about. You remember who built the second temple? Zerubbabel. Good for you, Zerubbabel. And it was horribly disappointing. But then Herod came along and rebuilt Zerubbabel's temple, and that was destroyed in 70 AD by Rome. So you got to say the 2 temples are Solomon's, that was built and then destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar in 586, and then the second temple built by Zerubbabel, remodeled by Herod, and then destroyed by Rome. All right, so that's it. Now, that was always the relationship. So here you got the little tiny city of David. By the way, let me just tell you, notice in this, do you know what I mean by the city of David now? This little tongue of land. You come right south from those 2 double gates and come down a little ways, and you'll see a bunch of big, very strange buildings. They're unlike anything else. Do you see that?
Doug, could you run the pointer on the exterior?
My pointer, all right, watch. See if I can make this pointer work. Okay, can you find my pointer? I'm going to go work.
Yeah, I saw it.
Okay, I'm on a wall. Can you see me?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Right on the wall, right down the bottom. All right, now watch. I'm going to go here. Here is the city of David, right here. Up here. Now I lost it. You probably lost it too. See, that's always. But that's it right there, and then on the other side. So those 2 roughly parallel walls that encompass that little tiny tongue of land. It's only about 9 acres. But Bob, how big is where's Cream? How big is your physical footprint? How big is your property in Oak Forest? 10 acres. So the city of David is smaller than the property owned by Grace Fellowship Church, right? So as I'm saying, it's a very small area, but watch this. Here's my point. Oh, I was going to say too. Josephus says that there was a queen from Africa by the name of Adiabene, and she came and she became a proselyte and moved to Jerusalem and lived here and was very gracious and helped people get through a famine and so on. So they said that she could have this area to build houses after her culture. Now, we don't know what that is, and the point is that she was from Africa, so she liked the heat. So the city of David, see, it's low. You go to the left, to the west, you climb up through those hovel houses. That's your mean steps that you took last night. Remember when we left and went through the turnstile and we started up those steps? You were climbing that hill right there where those little hovel houses are. Then you get up to, see where that theater is? It's a theater. They don't know where it was, but they put it right there. Can you find the theater right at the top there? All right, that is that Herva synagogue. Remember last night when I said, see that synagogue with the big synagogue that was burned down, and then it was built? That's about where you were. Then you kept climbing all the way, and I'll take you up to Jaffa Gate, which is just up there by those 3 big towers. Now my point is that Up there on the western hill is where you want to live. That's where you catch these breezes. So you want to live on the western hill. The city of David is not to be desired. It's important historically, but now in the Roman period, this is not where you want to live. But Queen Adiabene liked the heat, so they said, okay, you can live there, and that's what the model makers are trying to do. They're picking up on that. Now it's all conjecture, and they think they may have found her homes, and they're not right there. But at any rate, here's my point. That was the city of David. All right, when Solomon builds it, or better, when David buys that threshing floor up to the north, then Solomon builds a temple around it. Where are you going? Where's the primary entrance to the temple going to be? Well, obviously, you come up to the city of David. It's always on the south. So those two gates are the primary entrance, the Hulda gates. You go in underground and walk through a tunnel and up some stairs, and then you emerge on the Temple Mount, and you go in on the right side and out the left side, and so on. So, and all of this was because Herod had to build for the massive, massive crowds who would come here on Passover. So he reshaped the city with crowd control in mind. Now, so there's the eastern hill. Get this. The Temple Mount and the city of David are the eastern hill. Now watch. There is let's see if we can do it with my, huh?
Because that's the north.
What did you say?
You said City of David's eastern?
Correct.
It's the eastern hill. We're in the south. West is there. This is the Kidron, the Mount of Olives, down to the rift to the right. So the eastern hill, inside the walls, there are two hills. There is the eastern hill, which is the Temple Mount and the city of David. Then there is a valley called the Central Valley. You stood in it last night. Now I want you to find my pointer once again on the wall. See that?
Yeah.
All right, now watch. I'm just going to go over here, right here. Can you see that big structure right there?
Mm-hmm.
That's the pool of Siloam, John chapter 9. Well, what I want you to notice, and please see it, is there's a drainage ditch running all the way up. You see that? And on either side, and they only put these in here 5 or 6 years ago, on either side of that drainage ditch, I think it was a covered drainage ditch, but that's the way they represented it. But at any rate, on either side, and there's a reason for this, I'll show you in a couple days. On either side of that drainage ditch, there are stairs. Now, do you see them? Stairways going all the way up. Just several years ago, they were repairing a drainage system in a Greek Orthodox monastery, and in the effort, they discovered the pool of Siloam. It had been lost. We knew we didn't have it. We knew about where it was, but in the effort, they found that pool. As they were digging in the area, they found both of them, monumental stairways. And that clearly they are designed to carry traffic up to the temple. And then I showed you from the Mount of Olives today, it's hard to see, but do you see just beneath those two entryways? Those two entryways are called the Hulda gates. The one on the right you go in, the one on the left you come out, all right? Unless you're in mourning, M-O-U, and then you go in the left and out the right just so people will know to commiserate with you. But at any rate, let's just get used to those. Those are the Hulda gates. Hulda is the name of a prophet in the Old Testament. It's also the word for mole, like in the earth, not like on your arm. And so for one of those reasons, they call it the Hulda gates. But let's just get used to it. So just beneath the Hulda gates, there is a broad plaza, 215 feet wide, and then there is a series of 15 double steps, that is 2 steps to a step, that comes down. All of that, that's the steps that I showed you. I don't know if you remember, I looked across and I said, see, on that southern wall there's some white steps. They've been discovered. That's those steps. So that is the Central Valley. That is, come down here to the Pool of Siloam, let your eye run up right alongside of it, that drainage ditch with the walkway, and it'll go actually under. Look at the southwestern corner of the Temple Mount. That is find that guy. I want his pointer. Who is that guy?
Over there.
Over there.
Yeah, I gotta buy one of those. Mine won't work that well. I paid a lot of money for this thing, but I can't even find it now. what I'm looking at, I forgot what I was looking at. Oh, on that southwestern corner. All right, you see the red roof on the southern end of the temple? That's the royal stoa. Go way over to the left and drop down, and you'll see a monumental stairway that comes out and then does a right angle and comes toward us. That's called Robinson's Arch, for what it's worth. This walkway goes all the way under Robinson's Arch, all the way past that next obstruction, which is Wilson's Arch, I'll talk about it, and all the way up to the far corner. And you see those mammoth towers at the northwest. This is southwest. Did I say north? This is southwest. At the northwest corner is a fortress called Fortress Antonia, named for Mark Antony, of Cleopatra fame, and foolishness, but he was a sponsor of Herod early on, so he named it for him, Mark Antony. And there is a walkway that goes all the way up there in Jesus' day. You're going to walk on those paved stones from Jesus' days 3 times, so I'm going to make kind of a big deal of it. You're going to walk on them down here by the Pool of Siloam on Monday, and then you're going to walk on them twice under Robinson's Arch, and then all the way up by the Fortress Antonia underground. Today, they were not Jesus' day, on Tuesday. All right, now I keep trying to. So here are your 2 hills: the eastern hill, which is the Temple Mount and the city of David. Then you have the Central Valley, and watch how it climbs up. It's steep. Those hovel houses, I call them all the time, those little gray houses. The model makers are trying to say something to you. They're trying to say that up here with the big, huge villas with the red roofs, that's where the wealthy people live. That's the gated neighborhood. That's the high-class neighborhood. This is for the poorer folk, for the mercantile and artisan folk and so on. And most of what you're seeing is total conjecture, other than that clearly the wealthy would have lived on that hill. That is the western hill. Pardon me? That's right. Exactly. All right, so let me take you there. So look at this western hill. Everybody got this? The western hill over on your left here, it's high, catches the wind. And over here, you have the Central Valley, and then you have the eastern hill, which is actually 2 sections, the Temple Mount and the city of David. Now, 2 hills, 3 valleys. The 2 hills are the eastern and the western. The 3 valleys are the Kidron, and you've gotten to know that, and that takes all the way down to the Dead Sea. And notice how the Central Valley comes down and joins it. You see that? But look at this valley over here. Find the yellow backpack. You see that?
Yeah.
All right, right below there, she is standing about where the city where the city ended in Jesus' day on the north. But see that valley that cuts all the way down? And so look, this is all. Where do you build a city in antiquity? Water defense. What's defense? Hills. This city is defended on 3 sides. We talked about this from Gibeah this morning: west, east, and south by deep valleys. Now it's when there are times, and you saw it on that chart, when the city in the Old Testament under both David and Solomon, then under Nehemiah, the city is only the eastern hill. Well, now it's guarded on the east by the Kidron and on the west by the Central Valley, and it's a deep, deep valley. On the other hand, there are times, Hezekiah and Herod, when the city grows up on the western hill. Now the city is guarded on the west by the Hinnom and on the south by the Hinnom. But again, on the east by the Kidron. Now, I'm going to give more of that to you in a bit. All right, let me just give you some things here on the top of the western hill, and then we can walk around and we can see better. Boy, it's awful nice here, I'll tell you. So let me start with the temple in the Central Valley. I mentioned to you that mammoth stairway coming down from the royal stoa. The royal stoa is that red roof on the southern end of the Temple Mount. So we're looking at Herod's Temple Mount there. And that monumental stoa is a porch, or it's a place where you gather. It's got, columns and so on. But beneath that, the left hand or western end of that royal stoa is that Robinson's Arch. We're going to see that. We'll stand beneath it. You go a little further north, and there's a bridge. Now that bridge that comes out has 2 functions. Number one, see, all the priests were wealthy, the Sadducees, so they lived up here in the Western Hill. And they didn't want to have to go down and go through those common man gates down there, the Hulda gate, so they put their own gate in and they put a mammoth bridge to carry it. But the other thing is, and this is going to become very important, the temple used tons of water. We talked about this before. All of those sacrifices had to be cleansed. And the Levites were scurrying about and scooping up anything that could be burned or buried, and they were taking it off into the Jeshimon, where we were last couple of days, and disposing of it, but a lot of it had to just be washed away. And so there was a mammoth water channel that came up from Bethlehem, 5 miles south, and actually some of it then it was expanded to Hebron. But they brought water by aqueduct, Herod did, into the city. The city was well provided for, but much of that was carried across that bridge into the temple. And underneath the temple there were cisterns and huge caverns and viaducts and so on. It was well outfitted. All had to be hauled by hand or donkey, but they were constantly bringing water up on the Temple Mount and filling the storage units up there and so on. So that carried the water. Now, that, I was going to tell you something else about it, but there's a lot of interesting things. You know what I should tell you? Do you know which the bridge I'm talking about now, the one north of Robinson's Arch, comes out left from the wall of the temple? Which wall of the temple is that?
West.
Where did we stand last night? At the western wall. So see where that wall comes out? That's where we were standing last night. That's where the western wall is today. So we were up here we came down off the western hill, dropped down into the Central Valley, and we stood right across. I don't know if I'm making it very plain to you, but there is again, it's a crenellated wall. Crenellations are those arrow slots on the top, and it's a crenellated wall. It's a crenellated bridge, and there are arches, and right where that wall joins the western wall of the Temple Mount is where the region is we were standing last night. See if I can make that make sense to you. All right, now let's come up on this western hill, and a couple of things. Number one, see the orange roofs over there? Now, the model makers have been very kind to us. Everybody find the orange roofs? That is Herod's palace. Now, when Herod was alive, that's going to come out sounding real silly, but during Herod's lifetime, he lived there. Now, he had, way down to the west, that's that away, way down to the west, at Caesarea Maritima, had a nice summer palace. You go down there and stay, you saw that's where Paul was and so on, but that's where he lived right here. This was his home. Josephus says that other than the temple, it was the most beautiful buildings he ever built. I've talked about this podium that Herod had to build to put the temple on top of, this retaining wall. He had to do the same thing over there. He had to reshape the earth to make him this huge palace for himself. It actually had 2 palaces, and nothing has been found of it other than some of the foundations, but Josephus goes on, and every luxury you can imagine, and Herod loved to bring exotic trees and plants from all over the world, and animals, and having running about and so on. And he had, a lazy river, and he had just everything you could imagine in his palace. It was about 1/5 of a mile long. It's going to become important to us because that is where Jesus is tried by Pilate, okay? So we'll talk about that. On the other hand, come down toward me, toward us, make myself the center of all my attention, but there is a kind of a strange monument. It looks like a bit of a pyramid. It's got a pyramid-shaped top and then a couple of levels. And then, see me on the wall? Can you find me on that wall right over here? Okay, watch. Right there. See that building with the pyramid top? You got it? I'm wiggling my marker, my laser around on it. All right, you got it? All right, now listen. This is really strange. Listen, here's what's at stake. When pilgrims started to come here, after the city had been totally destroyed and Jews driven out of here for 300 years, And then pilgrims started to come back here, and they started to poke around and try and figure out where the Bible events happened. And they came to this high western hill, and then they explored this low eastern hill, and they said, well, David's not going to live down here in this squatty little place, so they decided this was the city of David, up here. Now, they got it wrong. But they said these were some Jewish Christians and Jews, and so they said, well, the Bible says that David built his tomb in his own city. So there was a spot that had some remembrance, and they decided to build a tomb of David there. So the model makers are marking that as the tomb of David, but we don't care. It's not the tomb of David. I'll take you to the tomb of David. It's on the side of the city of David, wouldn't you think? I'll tell you what's good, though, and I think the model makers are doing this for they're trying to be kind of subtle about it. So exactly where the misplaced tomb of David is, and I'll show you why when we get there, is exactly where the upper room is. So high on the western hill, there was a woman named Mary. She had a son named Mark. She had a house with a large upper room furnished for a feast. That means wealth. So it means a western hill. And I'll show you why the tradition takes us there very, very certainly. But there is where Jesus takes his disciples for what we remember as the Last Supper. He takes them for Passover. It's the fourth Passover of his life. All right, so let me just do one thing with you. What else? I don't think there's anything I need to point out from up here. But over here on the right side of the city, above this Kidron Valley that they've carved out for us, by the way, they worked really hard at mimicking the topography and so on of the city of Jerusalem, and they did so with such accuracy that when it rains, they have the same drainage problems on the model that they do in the city. And so this is the Kidron. They've mimicked the Kidron, but beyond the Kidron is the Mount of Olives, and on the backside of the Mount of Olives is Bethany, and that's where Jesus is staying. So let's talk first of all about the triumphal entry. Jesus would have come over near Gethsemane. He would have come over the Mount of Olives and down into the Valley of Kidron. Now, I pointed out to you that eastern gate where people say he would go in, he did. The only reason they say that, the Bible didn't say that, it doesn't make any sense, it won't fit with the drama, but they say it because it's on the eastern side. Well, the fact of the matter is Jesus didn't come to get into the city, he came to present himself, and so he's going to go where the crowds are. It's Passover. So he would have come down, it's Sunday of Passover, it's not Passover day, but it's Sunday of Passover week. He would have come all the way down the Kidron. It was well-crafted trail. And look right down here on the part of the city, of the model, which is closest to us. And you'll see a tower and a little gate. Now that gate, see it right down, let me see if I can find it, right down here. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Now, it's called the dung gate, because the gates are named for where they take you, and there was a dump out here. And you would clear up the dung and bring it out here to take it to the dung pile. But, I mean, it was a perfectly fine gate, and the dung pile was in an appropriately hidden place. But at the juncture, I think, of these two valleys, there's some debate, the Hinnom and the Kidron. But the point is that Jesus would have come all the way down the Kidron, and then he would have almost certainly, there was no gate on the east. He's got to find a gate where he can get in the city. And he would have come to this gate, and then he would have made his way up this pathway, up these ceremonial steps. Now, this is where the crowd is. At least hundreds of thousands of people milling about the city. And Jesus just makes his way up, and then the Bible says, Mark says that he went into the temple, looked around, and came back out. So he almost certainly would have gone in those right gates. That's how you went in, got up on the floor of the temple, looked around, and then came down the others, and then left and come out this same gate and gone back to Bethany. And given the excitement and so on, I think it was probably pretty much that's the whole day. That makes sense to you?
Well, how are people lined up? How are people lined up then?
Well, as he came up, I think they probably just parted like anybody. When some big celebrity comes along,
They're lined up out here.
I think, on the mountain, yeah. As he crests the mountain, the Mount of Olives, which we don't have here, he sees thousands of people throwing down their garments and singing the hosannas and so on. And I think all the way down there would have been crowds, and then it would have been packed as he made his way up toward the temple and so on. It's a bottomlessly exciting event, and especially measured against the horror of the Jewish and Roman authorities. You know, this is Passover. I like to say that at Passover, every Jewish heart is beating with thoughts of sedition. Good heavens, Passover celebrates a time when God delivered his covenant people from a horrible Gentile overlord in fulfillment of a promise. Well, guess what? There's a new horrible overlord. His name is Rome, and they got a promise. It's Daniel chapter 9. And so the last thing the Romans want is a guy riding into town and being accepted as king. How does he get away with it? I'd love to talk to you about it. But that's the triumphal entry. Now let's jump forward to Thursday night. And let's follow the last night of Jesus' life, all right? Once again, he's in Bethany. He leaves sometime on Thursday afternoon. He has arranged to have a Passover meal with his 12 in a large upper room in a house right there by that pyramid model. So he's going to do the same thing. He's going to come across the Mount of Olives, down the Kidron Valley. I think almost certainly he's going to find this gate right here. But now he's going to go in and he's going to make his way up through this neighborhood. See what I'm saying? All the way to a house with a large upper room furnished for a feast. Now, he's going to keep the feast. At the end of the feast, he's going to announce the betrayer is with me at the table. Shortly after that, after everybody says, is it I? Judas asks that question and Jesus answers it. But Judas makes excuses. And now watch this. By the way, this plot to arrest Jesus at Passover was laid on Tuesday night. It's explicit. But Mark 14, Matthew 26, Luke 22, but they didn't know where Jesus was. Jesus carefully kept the place secret. So now Judas is in that room. He's simmering. He knows he's got all these people waiting to arrest Jesus, and they can't do it until he tells them where he is. So the soldiers would have been up there in that fortress, the Antonia. So now Judas gets up, makes a lame excuse, and makes his way up there to fetch the Sanhedrinists. The disciples, undoubtedly, by the way, I think it helps to understand Judas was the only Judean. Everybody else was Galilean. So Judas might have just been, they might have thought he was going to go home, sleep the night at home because he lives close by. But, in fact, he's fetching the Sanhedrinists. Now, Jesus, and I think those disciples probably figured they would just lay back and go to sleep. Sleep the night there. But no, Jesus begins to teach, but then John 14:31, suddenly he says, arise, we need to leave. So now, find that monument where Jesus, not that monument that marks the place where Jesus was. Now, it's probably 11 o'clock anyway at night. The city is relatively quiet. He's going to make his way back down, out this gate right here, and then all the way along to Gethsemane, way up about here. In the clouds, my pointer works. So, and now, there he prays. Where is Judas going to go with the Sanhedrinists?
To the upper room.
He's going to go back to the upper room. That's where he left Jesus. So he does go back to the upper room. He finds it empty. John 18 gives us a huge help here because he says Judas knew the place, that is Gethsemane. Gethsemane features a cave. And the owner of the Gethsemane, when you see the word garden in the Bible, it means farm, okay? So there's a working olive oil farm over there. Whoever owns it has given Jesus permission to access it, and so he would often stay in the cave. We'll be in that cave on Wednesday morning. But now, Judas comes back to the upper room. There's nobody there. There's no place he could have gone with 12 of them in the middle of the night. He must be at Gethsemane, and John says he knew the place because they often stayed there. So now Judas comes down, follows Jesus. Meanwhile, Jesus has had that season of prayer, and now he says he wakes his disciples, and just as he emerges from the garden, here comes Judas. Matter of fact, Judas, I think, may have come into the garden to find him, but Judas comes, and Jesus is arrested way down there by Gethsemane. Now, everything is in readiness for him to be tried. The high priest lives just next door to those orange roofs. So now Jesus is brought back down this same way, and I think doubtless, well, some people think that there may have been an official entrance. They could have cut off some steps, but at any rate, Jesus is going to be brought right back up on the western hill, and there there's going to be hearings before the Jewish authorities, and then finally he's going to confess his messiahship, and they're going to take him around. He's going to be tried by by Pilate, who is staying at Herod's palace. That makes sense to you? All right. Yes, I'll talk about it more on the other side. Any questions about all that? I can drive you crazy here. The wall way on the north, on the far end. All that we're seeing here is very much as it was.
Where is this gate that you're talking about down here? I had a hard time.
All right, Henry, just find the part of the wall that's closest to us.
Oh, is that it right there?
Yep, that's the gate right there.
Thank you. I wasn't seeing it from where I was sitting.
You could. Yeah, good point. If I come around here, you can see it, but over here. Now listen, one other thing that occurs to me. The eastern hill is all that David or Solomon walled in. In Hezekiah's day, because the northern kingdom fell, hundreds of thousands of Jews fled down to the south, and many of them settled thickly on this western hill. And so Hezekiah realized, I gotta protect these people. So he built a wall, basically the wall that you're seeing, around the western hill. I'm talking Old Testament, but it's about the same territory. But down here at the bottom, where we're looking at this gate, what I want you to see is that here's the city of David, he's going to put the wall around the western hill. The wall has to do something a wall doesn't want to do. It has to cross a valley. Now, when Hezekiah's surveyors were preparing for that wall, they realized that given the fact that the wall had to cross that central valley, there would be a spot inside the walls that was about 1 foot lower than the spring that fed this city on the other side. The spring was over, the spring right about where these two people are standing, the 2 miles, right there is about where, down here on the hill. The spring, let me find it here. Spring is going to be down about here. So they discovered that, and that's Hezekiah's tunnel. So I just want you to see, they're going to bring the water of the Gihon spring, which is on the Kidron, the east side, underneath the city and spill it out into a pool in the Central Valley. Now we'll talk a lot more about that, but from here you can see that it's because the wall is crossing it's a low point. Your enemy can get up above you. You don't want that. You want the wall high. But here they had to cross the valley, and they found that spot where they could gravity feed the water of the Gihon spring inside the city. Yeah, Tim.
Is that an actual road or place?
No, come with me and I'll show you the Via Dolorosa. It's fun to talk about, but we can see it better down here.
Is that west wall north of Robinson's Arch right there between the gate and Robinson's Arch? Is that the part that we looked at last night?
Yes. North of Robinson's Arch and south of that other, which is called Wilson's Arch. The second one, which is really a wall, a bridge, is called Wilson's Arch.
Dr. Bookman,
Yeah.
is there any resemblance at all between the fictitious David's tomb and the actual upper room, what it would have looked like in this model?
No.
I didn't
No,
think so.
all they're trying to do is for both, I think they're being kind to the Christians because they know we want to be able to point out where it is. But if they put the upper room on here, what are you going to do? But it just happens to be exactly proximate to that bogus tomb of David, so
Got it.
it's kind of, it's higher than the theater for heaven's
That's
sakes.
what I was getting.
It's not even in proportion, so I think they're trying to
Okay.
say, you who look at us, just for our sake.